Okay, what I want to do now is show you how to use various particle functions in After Effects. And the first thing we're going to do is making sparks coming off of a fire and then putting that onto another background. So the first thing we need to do, of course, is to create a new composition. And I'd like it to be 1920 by 1080. And we will call it Sparks. And then the next thing we have to do is to make two solid backgrounds. So we'll do the first one. It will be a new solid. And you want it to be black, although you could use another color. And we'll call it background. And we'll make one other solid and call that one Sparks. There we go. Now what we want to do is go into Effects, go down to Simulation. The one that you want to grab is called Particle World, and you could drop it right onto here. And you'll see that when we hit play, you get these kind of ugly sparks. So we're going to go up into this corner here, and you'll see that you have CC Particle World, and you have Producer, Physics, and Particle. And so what you want to do is, rather than line, you'd like to do shaded sphere, and that is under particle type. And in physics, rather than explosive, you'd like directional axis. So already you've changed it. So you want to go into particle and you want to change the birth size and maybe perhaps make that, well, we'll start with 0.09. And you want the depth size to go just to 0. And we'll start with that. Eventually we're going to change the size of them. There's a lot of tweaking that goes on here. So you want to actually change the direction that this goes. And one of the ways that you do it is with velocity. And the higher the velocity, the more it stretches out. So you want to bring it so it goes almost straight down. But it's still going in the wrong direction if we want to work with sparks. So what we need to do is change the gravity. We have to switch it around. And you go from 0.5 to minus 0.45, somewhere in there. You can see that we finally turned around the gravity and have the sparks going upwards. Now I think we need to knock the birth size down a little bit. That might be a little bit better there. And we want to go into Producer. Up there. And the first thing that we'd like to do is change the radius of the emitter right here. So we want to spread it out so it kind of covers the entire width of the screen here. So that you'd go under Radius, under X. And you can just stretch it out. It's starting to look a little bit more like sparks, but it's starting kind of right in the middle of the screen. And now a couple of the other things you could do is to kind of play with the depth of this, is to change the Y radius and the Z radius. See, if you change the Z radius, you actually, the depth of field changes a little bit. And then you want to lower the entire thing so it appears to be coming from under the ground. So it's starting to look a little bit like sparks. And you want to work a little bit here with size variation so that you get sparks of all different sizes. And the opacity, if you want them really dark or much lighter. Close these for a moment. And we could change the color a little bit. I think they start off a little bit too yellow. So we could move it down a bit and make it a little bit more orange. So they're starting to resemble sparks to some degree, perhaps a little bit too fast. And the depth size should actually go down to 0 so they disappear into nothing. And one thing we can do is add a little bit of motion blur to these so they feel like they're streaking a little bit. And just down in these tabs here, this particular tab there is motion blur. So you just click on it and you get just a little bit of blurring as they move up. Now probably one last thing we can do is really slow them down. You could put a little bit of extra resistance in there. It causes them to die out a little bit sooner. And what we would do next is go into layer, time, and then time stretch. And we'll put this at 300%. You'll see they go a lot slower now. And we could still make them go a little bit more to the side, add some velocity. Change a bit the inherent velocity so they move around a bit. And there you go, you have some fairly good sparks. Next up, what I'd like to do is to put a background behind here and have it appear to come from a crater in a mountain. So I think I'll do it the easier way and just put the background in there. And what we need to do is go to the desktop. I actually have a photo ready to go, and I will just drop it into the bin here. Or I could just drop it right onto the layers right here. So I'll bring it down and I'll put it just between here. So you can see I've got the sparks with that nice mountain background right here. And what I would like to do is, I would like to, and you notice I put it right under the sparks. We don't really need this background anymore. What I'd like to do is to make it appear that the sparks are just coming from in this little valley that looks a little bit like a crater. So the first thing that we want to do with the sparks is we actually would like to change the diameter on the x-axis and kind of raise it up a little bit and then put another layer on top of this. Okay, so we go back into sparks, into the effect controls, and we'll go down to producer here. And we're going to change the radius to about there. And we'll change the position somewhat. On the y-axis, we're going to raise it up a little bit lower in there. And then we can tweak some of the parameters of this to get a more realistic looking spark effect. But the first thing that we need to do is to make a new layer. And we're going to make a copy of this blue night background. So you just go Command C and then Command V. And you want to take one of them and actually take one of these layers and put it actually above spark so it appears to sort of block it out. And then what you need to do is get the pen tool and kind of cut out one layer along here. You remember I did that with the animation demonstration. So you get your pen tool, and I think we want to create the mask right along here. And make sure you go a little bit outside of the image itself. And then you can see once you complete the outline, it actually just cuts this mask out and it eliminates everything else. So you can actually see the particles coming out from behind here. So we probably want to increase the number of sparks in there, maybe make them go a little bit faster. So we go back into sparks. And we could change the position a little bit. perhaps so it looks like it's really coming out of the depth of that. And make the birth size a little bit smaller. Make the longevity a little bit more. And the birth rate higher. So you see more sparks coming out. And a little bit more velocity to have it appear that there's some wind there. There you go. So now you got sparks coming right out of the mountain, but I think it's still a little bit too widespread. We want it to appear to coming from a tighter spot, so we just still have to change the radius somewhat. There you go, and you can play with these radiuses also. Now you can have these sparks coming out of here. Now with other effects, you could make a fire, you could make smoke and things like that. What I'm going to show you here is a much easier use of particle functions, and that's just adding snow to this image right here. And I'm going to open up a new composition and use the same image here. Now, you'll notice that with the sparks, we actually put the sparks as a separate layer over top of the image. But some of these particles you add or you apply directly to the image just as an effect. So we go down here and we make a new composition, and we'll call this, of course, snow. We just want one layer in there. I think what I'll do is I'm going to add first one other layer just so you can see it against a black background. And then we will eliminate that, because then you can sort of work the snow effect a little bit more cleanly. I'm going to add a new solid, and the solid will be black. And that's over top there. So now we could just add the snowfall directly to that. So you want to bring your opacity up. You can see that they're very small flakes, so what we want to do is adjust the size of the flakes. And you can make them go faster, or you can knock the speed down a little bit. And you can change variation in size, so you get different size flakes. And you can add here in the number of flakes, you can just add a lot more, make much heavier snow, or you could make lighter snow. And if you want, you could change it to the color of blood, if you happen to like that, but you can't see it so well in that black background. So we'll make it back to white again. And you can add a little bit of wind in there, a little bit of variation in the wind. So you can see the flakes kind of moving around. Now we want to actually put it onto that background. So if that's kind of the effect of snow that you like, that's what you would do. And you can see there's others. There's rainfall, drizzle, hair. You could try putting hair in the mountain. But I'm just going to show you snowfall here. So what you'll do is you'll put the image over top. And of course you can't see it now. And you just take this snowfall and you copy it. You do Command C, and then you click onto the image and you do Command V. So you just have the snowfall right over top of that. And increase the opacity a little bit. There you go. That's how you add snow. Now, of course, you don't have to take that step of doing it on a dark background. I did that just to show you a little bit of what it looks like without any interference from the background. For our last episode today, we're going to make smoke and have it coming out of a volcano. So first thing I need to do again is to make a new composition, and I will call it stromboli. That's my favorite dish. Actually, it's the name of a volcano in Italy. So we need to bring in an image of stromboli, create a new solid. And once again, we'll first do it on a black background, and then we will have a look at stromboli. And then we will do it on island. Okay, what we need to do is to go back into effects and go into simulation, and it would be particle playground. And you see particle playground actually has some sort of fountain of particles, but that's not yet what we want. We'll put it around there. And you want to go to the cannon and change the radius of the barrel a little bit so you get kind of a wider smoke to it. There you go. And you can change the particle radius a little bit. And all of these values you can change, actually. And if you'd like some red smoke, you can keep that there. But we're going to start with a little bit of white smoke. So the next thing we need to do is we can change a little bit the gravity, and that will speed up or slow down the smoke. And the direction of the gravity is we want to change it 180 degrees, so we'll make that 360. So you'll see that it flows upwards. And then we want a little bit of a change in direction here. So it still doesn't look like smoke because it's just a number of cubes. So what we'll do is add a blur to it. So we go to blur and sharpen, but the one that we want isn't in here, so we have to type it in. And it's an obsolete tool, but it's still within the library. So you type in fast blur, and there you go. And you have fast blur here. So you can just apply it to there. And then you go down to blurriness, and you want to change it to, well, this is a little bit experimental. You could change it to about 50% blur. So that's starting to look a little bit more like smoke. And you want to change a few of the things, perhaps like particles per second, or the barrel radius, if you want to make it a little bit wider, the size of the particles. And you can see it's starting to look a little bit more like smoke. Also, you want to do the random spread and a little bit of velocity spread. And that's to randomize it somewhat. And perhaps a little bit more blur there. So it looks a little bit like smoke, and what we'll do is we'll make several layers of this and randomize each layer and change somewhat the colors. But first what I would like to do is apply it to the actual image. Now you can see the image there. And we need to make the image a little bit bigger. Okay. So we can go into transform. So what we want to do with this is we want to make a copy of it. So what we need to do is get our pen tool. And then down here, we don't really need too much of a mask. And there you can see the smoke behind this particular layer. So now we need to move that smoke over a little bit. So we can make it go down a little bit so it feels like it's coming more from inside of the volcano. And just move it over a little bit. So now it looks a little bit like it's emitting from the volcano. Perhaps move it over even a little bit more. So it looks okay. But now you can make several layers of smoke to give it a more realistic feel. So you take this layer and you copy and you paste it several times. And then you take each layer and you work it a little bit. So I think the background layer, the very inside layer, we would like to make a little bit of perhaps some orange tinge to the edge of it. So what we could do with that one is just change the color a little bit, perhaps a little bit more orange, and then shift it over a little bit. So we work a little bit on the direction. There you can see a little bit of it popping out. You change the velocity of it and the number of particles per second. We could perhaps put a little bit more in there, make the radius perhaps a little bit smaller. And you can see it's similar, but you still want to randomize these a little bit more. So you could change the velocity spread, make the velocity down a little bit more, perhaps the particles a bit bigger, and even play a little bit with the gravity. So now the top one, I think we could add a little bit of gray in there. And we want to move that gray over to the edge, the other edge. And then change some of these values. Maybe make that one go a little bit faster, perhaps increase the blurriness there. And bigger particles. So here I'm sort of just going randomly, working with these. And I think the barrel radius a little bit smaller, so it just feels like it's on the edge. But a bit more random. And then one of the other layers, we could actually, we could make it a little bit wider and out to this edge here, and then it will give a little bit more white smoke on that side. And I think this gray one, make it a little bit smaller again. And maybe smaller particles there. There we go. And if we might want a little bit more glow coming out of the bottom, we could take another one of these and actually put it on top. Okay, and then you could play around, make other layers where you can see a little bit more orange coming through there. So this is a very fast sort of smoke that I've made here. You can do a great deal of tweaking and actually make it, we could put a little bit more, a little bit darker there. There you go. There you have some smoke.